And now on Nights with Steve Price from the 50-Up Club, Christopher Zinn.
Evening to you, Mr. Zinn.
Yes, good evening, Steve, and listeners.
And our listeners have been pivotal in this debate about superannuation. Now, what's caught the Turnbull government out with these changes that they announced on budget night, and I will never forget budget night because I sat and watched the Treasurer's speech. I was in Parliament House in Canberra doing the 2GB program from there that night on our network stations right around the country, and Scott Morrison walked in at about 7:30 to speak with Ross Greenwood. And I stuck out my hand and said, "Thank you for ruining my retirement, Treasurer." And he laughed and shook my hand and went and did the interview. I didn't realise just how much he'd ruined my retirement. And in fact, our financial advisor on the program, Brett Steen from Jacaranda Financial Services, pinged them the next day on the transition to retirement changes before anyone else in the country cottoned onto it.
And there's been massive denial since then. Yeah, I mean, you need expertise to know what's going on, and it just seemed that they thought, well, no one will notice. It doesn't really, matter. But in fact, this has just become such a growing distraction in terms of the election, and it shows no sign of going away. And you're right, now suddenly transition to retirement has suddenly come up, and a lot of people realise that they stand to be affected, and ones who certainly don't regard themselves in the top 4% of income earners.
No, and Brett was on Sky tonight because one of the claims that the government continues to make, which we have to blow out of the water because it's an untruth, is that this is only going to affect the top 4% and they're trying to quote Productivity Commission figures, Chris, that say only 115,000 people are going to be affected. That is absolute rubbish. As close as we can work out, and Brett's done the numbers, it's more like 500,000, probably 600,000.
Exactly, and according to some of the analysis, people on salaries of 70,000, people who are teachers and nurses, hardly the fat cat. Yet the government the coalition continues to push this line. I've heard it on the radio today, suddenly saying, only the 4%. They must be the only people who actually believe it, and they've got this amazing situation where Labor are waving the anti-retrospectivity flag as well. No doubt. I mean, super, as the Prime Minister said this week, is complex. What's complex is the changing of the rules that take place, and that's what drives people crazy, and, of course, to lose faith and confidence in the system.
So what sort of feedback are you getting from 50-Up Club members?
I think people are just asking what's going on. I mean, certainly there is an anger, there is a disillusionment, there is people asking, well, what should I do? Now, that's a hard thing for us to, you really have to say, and this has just been a windfall for financial planners, and hopefully people are able to find advisors in that category who are competent and trustworthy and can give them the advice that they need. Because as an individual, it's very hard to navigate and to know. And of course, we don't actually even know whether all these things, one, will survive the election. Two, there's been indications today from various ministers that there might be some sort of consultation, but no changes. So, will it actually ever become law at the end of the day?
Well, I think what will happen is, and Malcolm Turnbull, as you probably saw today, was again ambushed at his media appearance. He was in, of all places, a mattress factory in Western New South Wales, Western Sydney. And, he got one question about foreign trade and mattresses, and then bang, straight into it, superannuation. Are you going to change it? Will it still be there? Will it survive? He has to now say, and he can't change it because he will look like he's the biggest backflipper of all time. He'll have to say, we're sticking with the policy. Now, that's a risk for him, although I think it will change too many people's votes, because I think people are going to hang on to the notion that super under Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison will be better than super under Bill Shorten and Chris Bowen. And they're also getting a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I think, Chris, that after the election we'll sit down and have another look at this, and if we have to change some bits of it, then we might. Now, the PM won't say that, but the backbenchers are certainly saying that out in their electorates.
Yeah, and I suppose those smoke signals are coming down. If they're a bit too subtle for those people, certainly many of our members who are really wondering what's going on, to get a gist of it. But look, ultimately, your power lies in the ballot box. And, would you switch? Labor might give you a plus in terms of retrospectivity, but perhaps not in other areas. So, yes, it's an extraordinary thing how it's really fascinating how something like this can grow and grow and grow, and it's very hard, and it's a huge distraction for everyone concerned.
It'd be interesting to run a poll of your members on a simple question: do the superannuation changes, as announced by the coalition, make you more or less likely to vote for them?
Yeah, and that is entirely possible. I think we're well considering that, and it's a question of what changes and how to explain it. But certainly things like the concessional caps which used to be 35,000 if you're over 50, that's down to 25,000. I had a meeting with one of my super sources today, and they admitted that was really something that was going to particularly be difficult for people over 50 whose kids have gone away, they've paid the mortgage, looking to top up their super because they finally got some spare cash. That is really going to limit it. So, I mean, it is that transition to retirement. It's the concessional payments that you can make on the super. The issues about the $500,000 lifetime, that's another one. But there's some key ones that are quite easy for people to understand. And I think they don't need to do much thought to realise that it's going to affect them. And certainly in that age demographic, they are very vulnerable.
And I do laugh, and I laugh and get annoyed at the same time, where people say super's too hard to understand, people don't understand it. Even Andrew Bolt was trying to prosecute that argument with me last night. Well, I can tell anybody who's listening to me who's over the age of 55, who's in a transition to retirement phase with their super, or is over 60 and already into drawing down on their super, we all understand it very well because we've actually taken the time to understand it because guess what, folks? It's what we're going to live off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the problem with saying that things are complicated means that people disengage from it and don't really focus. Certainly does need a bit of work. You need to be a bit determined about it. But the stakes are very high on this particular issue. And really, as I've said, it's the idea of super and a nest egg that grows through time. That's fairly simple to understand, but it is the complexities introduced through the changes, through the various taxation mechanisms. That's what makes it hard and gives a great living to many financial planners.
Always a pleasure to catch up, Chris. Thanks a lot, mate.
My pleasure. Thanks,
Christopher Zinn from the 50Up Club.